former national security advisor to Vice President Pence. That's, I guess, what's sort of, bouncing around in my thick skull, General, this notion that the president might truly have forgotten what one top general after another advised him about. And I think that's even more alarming. Your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, for having me. Yeah, look, those conversations that are held between the senior military and the senior State Department and everybody are generally held in the Situation Room because of the sensitivity of the discussions. But those discussions are pretty extensive. It's really hard to forget discussions like that because they're so hard-hitting. And the Situation Room is very small anyway, seats 34 people in the White House. And when they make those comments, they stick with you. I mean, to be very honest with you, Neil, I can remember discussions we had 4 years ago when we first came into the White House under the Trump administration, because the impact of those discussions are so important. You're not talking about what you're going to have for breakfast tomorrow. You're talking about national security decisions, huge decisions, and I believe that everybody remembers quite clearly what was said. Here's the second piece. There are summaries of conclusions that are kept on every single discussion in the Situation Room. All they have to do is go back on record and look. And the third piece of that is there are always notes kept, and those pieces of information are always kept by the president and passed to the president.
General, I'm wondering, obviously, these gentlemen were called before Congress to testify, so they had to share their thoughts on this, and they're held under oath. But they seem to be compelled to say, look, this wasn't our advice. Normally, recommendations you give the president, the great discretion is advised, and even all of these gentlemen were saying the same. But they really felt an urgent need to get their point of view out, that they didn't think this was a good idea. And in so saying, make it clear that the disaster that followed was on the president. He's exercising his right to overrule them. He is the commander-in-chief. They get that. I get that. I'm sure you get that. But that they're saying, it's not on us here. This was not our idea. That's rather telling in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And by the way, there's real consistency here. Because Mark Milley was the chairman for President Trump as well. Before that, he was chief of staff of the Army. And you had a lot of the same intelligence people and operations people that have carried on to administrations because they're professionals out there. The numbers you are hearing, 2,500, are the same numbers we were told back when the Trump administration was still there. This was a decided number that came from the CIA, came from the State Department, came from the intelligence community, the DNI, came out of DOD. So this number is very consistent. So when they said 2,500, it resonated with me because that's the number we were told that was the baseline number. So when we put together the Doha Agreement, the 29 February agreement, we knew that was a number we were going to go to and then hold. We were going to stay at 2,500 with over 3,000 paramilitary supported by the CIA, the 5,000 NATO troops that were there, keep Bagram Air Base open until all the conditions of the agreement were met. And only when they were met would we move to the full removal. And that would have meant there would have been a government of reconciliation with the Taliban and with the Ghani government. That was the number one goal we had. And the Doha Agreement, you can pull it up online. And by the way, a member of Congress said it was signed by the president. No, it wasn't. It was signed by Mullah Baradar for the Taliban and Zal Khalilzad, who was our special representative for Afghan reconciliation. And again, it was all conditions-based. And I was there and saw it. And here's the one thing that's very, very important for people to hear, and they probably don't realize this. 4 days after that agreement was signed, on the 3rd of March, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, picked up the phone and called Mullah Baradar. It was all done through a translator. In fact, during the translation, I kept thinking, wow, I wonder how this was being received. And he told Baradar very clearly, if you violated the conditions of the agreement, we were not leaving, and that he would pay the consequences for not coming through this agreement. And one of the agreements that was held, and even Mark Milley said that, is they would not attack any U.S. troops or kill any U.S. troops during the entire time the negotiations went on. We did not lose a single American soldier from the 29th of February, 2020, till the 13 great Americans were killed at Karzai International Airport. And the other agreements we were working towards. But there was a baseline, and we weren't going to move from those baselines. So when they talk about a date certain, well, that date was always movable. It's a forcing function whenever you have a date. but it was always movable until the conditions were met. So I'm really going to push back on people when they talk about the Doha Agreement, because I was very close to working that agreement, both with State Department, with the Defense Department, and our special representative working the issue in Afghanistan.
Did that agreement, very quickly, General, include if the Taliban started taking over large swaths of the country or going after government forces? Did it include a provision for that? Not so much targeting Americans, but Afghanis.
No, that it didn't include the provision, but the when the President Trump made it very clear to Baradar what would happen if they continued their offensive. There was, when we left office, there was basically a strategic stalemate. Nothing had really moved. It had stayed the same.
So I guess what I'm asking, I'm sorry, General, just to be clear, because I've heard that the back and forth, and you can help shed some light on this. If the government, forces were going to be under the attack that they were by the Taliban, would that have changed or, nullified the Doha Agreement as you knew it?
The Doha Agreement didn't exactly say that, but we provided the military support for all the Afghan forces. For example,
right.
Our artillery support, our air support, our advisor support was all part of the Afghan military fighting the Taliban. And they did not attack any major key provinces while we were still in position, because they knew the response was going to be kinetic. In other words, we were going to go after them really hard. But to be very specific, Neil, was it written into the agreement? No, it was not. But it was sent forward and by President Trump when he called up Baradar and made it very clear to him.
Got it. All right, General, thank you very, very much for taking the time to explain a couple of things. It's always still out.